Hello, crew. It is the afternoon, Thursday, the 12th of January, and I am on my way back to work. It's a little before 1 o'clock. I came home for lunch, and I actually don't usually do. Usually, when I come home for lunch, I hang out with my family and have conversations. But my wife had gone to lunch with her mother, so I popped up the computer and I managed to watch your video that you put up last night. And you mentioned in that video that you are having someone look over your policies. Procedures. I can't remember who. Was it Anne who you said was doing that? I can't remember. And that she was impressed with all the policies and procedures that you'd written, and you want to find out, number one, if they're accurate, and number two, if they're being followed. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to point out to you that essentially the goal of change management is to implement your policies and procedures in a predictable way. So, the fact that you don't know whether or not your policies and procedures are up to date, and likely most of your employees have not seen said policies and procedures, it demonstrates a failure of change management within your organization. Now, I have exactly the same thing going on in my department program at work, where we come up with the way we're supposed to do things, and then sometimes they're followed and sometimes they're not. And we don't have, but what we haven't done is systematically set up procedures for communicating and reaffirming amongst my staff that we are in fact following procedures. And that's when I'm talking about change management, that's kind of what I'm talking about. So in this example, you have an orientation program with your staff where they're taught how to do what it is that they do to make coffee and make money. And and that's the de facto way that things work, as opposed to the sort of theoretical way things work. And what I think should happen ideally is what you do is you adjust your policies and procedures so that you don't create these overly burdensome policies and procedures. You try to, in your policies and procedures, you try to elucidate your goals and what you're trying to achieve, and you give examples of things that have worked and haven't worked maybe, and then you free the employee to follow those policies and procedures. And the other thing that you would do, you would maintain in those policies and procedures if you discover things that don't work, or you discover that there aren't specific needs that you're meeting that aren't elucidated in those policies and procedures. You add them later. But then you have to have a process for making sure that your staff become familiar with these. And that means that the policies and procedures can't be too elaborate, right? They have to be simple enough so that they don't overwhelm your staff learning how to use them and implement them. So, but they have to be written down somewhere. And so what you do is the details, if there's detailed stuff you need, you got to make it reference material. It's just like, if you're teaching your kid math or something, or you're teaching, statistical techniques. There's no reason to memorize a statistical technique because it's there in the book. If you understand what it does and when you should use it, you can go back and look it up. And it should be the same thing with your policies and procedures. If there's things that people don't do regularly, it's an opportunity for them to look it up. But they need to understand where it is and how to use it. So your policies and procedures become a tool and a reference. And then the things that people do on a regular basis, they'll just remember. They won't need to go look it up. Now, they may occasionally need refreshers. So that's the other change management thing you need to do, is you need to have maintenance processes in place. So, maybe once every 6 months or once a year, you get all your staff together and you say, hey, we're going to all drink coffee and spend 45 minutes talking through the policies and procedures and talking about what we're doing and whether or not it's working, and then we're going to go again for another year or whatever. You could do a yearly review. Anyway, that's what I talk about when I'm talking about change management, because otherwise, you have great conversations and you figure things out with some staff and you don't figure it out with other staff. And in our organization, actually, we were having a discussion this morning in a meeting about training somebody to just to use an information site we have online that's on our intranet. And somebody on our staff discovered that not everybody knew, or there was an individual who didn't know how to use this site, who you would have thought would have known how to use it. And they're like, oh yeah, there's probably a lot of other people out there. Well, we don't have time. My staff don't have time to go to 600 different people and check to see if they know how to use the site. So what we need is some sort of process in place when people are hired or when they have their annual reviews, or at some point on a regular basis, where we can check to make sure people understand the processes and that they're using them and that they're working for them. And that, of course, means being more proactive, and it takes more time and effort for you as a manager. But in the end, I think it works out for the best. So I am still on my crusade to convince you that policies and procedures are not necessarily a bad thing. Bureaucracy is not a dirty word. It's the people who apply it. Just like capitalism isn't a bad thing. You've got all these people slathering, going off on Mitt Romney for being a venture capitalist, and venture capitalism isn't a bad thing. It's just that there are people who apply it in ways that are unfair, just like anything else. So, I am done. I still got a little ways to go to work, but I'm going to wrap this up, and hopefully it will upload from my phone when I get on the network at work, and I won't have to think about it while I'm doing other things, work-related things, productivity things. Until I talk to you again, I am still dead.